John Lee thanks Carrie Lam and the Executive Council for pushing forward the government restructuring plan. A new COVID-19 outbreak at a Chungcheong eatery just before further relaxation of social distancing measures.
Good evening. The Executive Council today approved the government restructuring plan. A massive and long deliberated move is set to be implemented on July 1st.
In it, new policy bureaus will be set up with additional deputy positions. Jackie Lin reports.
Finally, more clarity for the government restructuring plan for the next administration, which will take office in just 1.5 months. The plan involves a lineup of 15 bureaus instead of the current 13 and 3 secretaries of departments. They include a new Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau, split from the Home Affairs Bureau. The Transport and Housing Bureau will separate into the Transport and Logistics Bureau and the Housing Bureau. The Food and Health Bureau will be renamed the Health Bureau, which will oversee the pandemic situation and medical and health services. The Environment Bureau will be renamed the Environment and Ecology Bureau, which will also helm the Hong Kong Observatory. 3 new key positions in the administration, too. They are the Deputy Secretary for Justice, Deputy Financial Secretary, and Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration. Chief Executive-elect John Lee revealed these new deputies could bypass their department heads and directly report to the city's leader. A political task, too, for the new justice position, a role not included in Carrie Lam's original restructuring plan.
I want the Secretary for Justice and the Deputy to go out to explain in full the legal system in Hong Kong so as to let people know the true picture of Hong Kong, particularly when we have been badmouthed by some politicians for political reasons.
The newly unveiled structure entails some 57 new roles. Altogether, they cost taxpayers some $95 million a year in recurrent expenditure. That's 3 times the amount reviewed by CE Carrie Lam of around $30 million. The incumbent defends the new additions.
Each chief executive will have his own governance style, and having regard to the aspirations of the people and the priorities that he has set for the next 5 years, it is only natural for him to come up with more ideas on how to restructure the government.
Lam adds she's confident Lee could form his cabinet despite hiccups reported over potential candidates due to foreign sanctions. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 328 new COVID cases, about 100 more cases than yesterday. That includes 39 imported cases.
Starting Thursday, the second phase of the relaxation of social distancing measures will begin. This, as Chief Executive Carrie Lam said, the pandemic is currently still manageable, but admitted that risks persist. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Several clusters continue to expand around the city, ranging from eateries to a snooker club. That includes the Tamjia Yunnan Mi Xian restaurant in Changcheng, where 3 diners who do not know each other had meals there on the same day. 8 more people linked to the Sky Cuisine in Shangwan were infected, bringing the cluster's total number of infections to 64. The Sungmong Snooker Club identified 1 more infection. For nearly half a month, COVID infections have stabilized between 200 and 300. The CE said the situation is under control, adding more social distancing measures can be relaxed on Thursday as scheduled. Restaurants' dine-in hours will be extended until midnight. While only 8 people are permitted to dine together, the capacity for banquets has increased to 120. Performance arenas and religious venues can increase their capacities to 85%. Audiences will also be allowed to eat inside theaters. Party rooms, nightclubs, mahjong parlors, karaokes, and cruises will reopen on Thursday as well. Bars can open until 2 a.m., with a maximum of 4 people per table. Gym goers and visitors to indoor sports centers will no longer need to wear masks.
Of course, we have long passed the peak of the 5th wave. However, we are at a static low level. We have seen clusters appearing, so there is a risk. In the next stage, there will be more activities allowed without mask wearing, so we have to be very careful.
Lam added she has no intention to delay the 3rd phase of the vaccine pass. That is, by the end of the month, the public will need to have received 3 jabs to enter restaurants and other designated areas. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
For the first time, the COVID Vaccination Indemnity Fund has paid out $2 million in compensation for death following immunization. The case involved a 66-year-old woman who died 16 days after receiving her first dose of the BioNTech vaccine. Autopsy results show she died of myocarditis. She also had pneumonia, which was found to be a key condition leading to her death. The advisory panel said that while it's still unclear if the patient's cause of death was directly related to vaccination, uncertain cases, as such, could receive the damages under the fund's terms. As of April 23rd, more than 240 claims for compensation had been approved. They involve side effects such as severe allergic reaction and temporary facial paralysis, a condition known as Bell's palsy. So far, a total of some $33 million has been dispersed.
The mainland has recorded 1,049 new COVID-19 cases with some 800 infections identified in Shanghai. But in all 16 districts of the city, there were 0 COVID infections outside quarantined areas for 3 days in a row. Shanghai plans to allow outdoor activities in stages and gradually resume public transport services starting Sunday. Beijing reported 43 locally acquired coronavirus infections and 9 asymptomatic cases. In the city's virus-hit Chaoyang district, most shops remain closed and schools have suspended classes. Residents have to show proof of a negative test result before boarding trains or buses. Meanwhile, Guangzhou, the provincial capital of Guangdong, has detected its first case of the Omicron subvariant BA.2.12.1.
North Korea is reporting another large jump in sicknesses suspected to be COVID-19 as a mass outbreak sweeps across the country's unvaccinated population. State media says the North's antivirus headquarters reported almost 270,000 more people have fevers and 6 people have died. That raises North Korea's deaths to 56 after almost 1.5 million people became ill with fever since late April. North Korea lacks testing supplies to confirm coronavirus infections in large numbers. Experts say the North's fatalities may surge in coming weeks as the virus takes hold. The country shunned millions of vaccines from the UN-backed COVAX distribution program. South Korea has publicly offered to send vaccines, medicine, and health personnel, but North Korea has so far ignored the proposal.
Ukraine's military is working to evacuate all remaining troops from their last stronghold in the besieged port of Mariupol.
The evacuations from the Azovstal plant could be the beginning of the end of the longest battle of the war.
As buses pulled away from the battered steel mill, Russia's defense ministry confirmed that more than 250 Ukrainian fighters holed up in the steel plant that laid down their arms and surrendered. Ukraine's military said more than 50 seriously wounded fighters were taken to a hospital east of the city. Other fighters were evacuated through a humanitarian corridor. Yesterday, Russia announced an agreement for the wounded to receive treatment in a town held by pro-Moscow separatists. In a pre-recorded message, the commander of the Azov regiment said their mission was completed with as many lives saved as possible. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the evacuation of the fighters saved their lives. Ukraine needs Ukrainian heroes alive, he added. Elsewhere, Ukrainian fighters have driven Russian forces out of the area near Kharkiv, the biggest city in the northeast. But fierce fighting and shelling continued across a broad area of the country's east. Still, a British land warfare expert says the window for quick Russian wins on the battlefield has closed.
The Russian capacity for offensive operations is going to bleed away. It's going to continue to decline. So I simply don't think that we are likely to see any major Russian breakthroughs, at least in a tactical military sense. You might be looking at a stalemate.
Turkey's objections to Sweden and Finland applying to join NATO could present a serious obstacle. The ratification process is expected to take up to a year, and Sweden and Finland need each of NATO's 30 members to approve their applications. But Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said he will not approve either bid, accusing them of hosting members of Kurdish militant groups. Erdogan called the Scandinavian countries guest houses for terrorist organizations. He added that Sweden and Finland should not bother sending delegations to Ankara to persuade Turkey to support their bids. Yesterday, at a collective security treaty organization summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Russia has no problem with Finland and Sweden's NATO membership bid, but will react if NATO's moves in the two countries is considered a threat.
Yesterday's announcement that McDonald's is winding down its business in Russia is being seen as another sign of the country's isolation over its war in Ukraine. The Chicago-based burger giant is selling its 850 restaurants in Russia. McDonald's is seeking a buyer who will employ its 62,000 workers in Russia and will continue to pay those workers until the deal closes. McDonald's first restaurant in Russia opened in the middle of Moscow more than 3 decades ago, shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall. An American who has lived in Russia and Ukraine and went to the Pushkin Square McDonald's in 1990 after it first opened calls the move an end of an era.
It was a symbol of the decline of the Cold War, coming just months after the Berlin Wall fell, and just months before the Soviet Union fell, about 2 years before the Soviet Union fell. And the lines were absolutely enormous. We were being told that they were 5 and 6 hours long. McDonald's was something different. It had a different brand and obviously had a much bigger reach today in Russia as well. It was a symbol of Russia coming into the world.
Still ahead on tonight's news, authorities say the suspect in Sunday's California church shooting was motivated by his hate of Taiwanese people. In Sri Lanka, more protests on the streets demanding the resignation of the country's president. And Hong Kong's first subsidized housing project by a private developer is expected to be completed by 2027.
Welcome back to TVB News. The man who killed a doctor and injured 5 others at a California church shooting Sunday was motivated by hatred against Taiwan, according to investigators.
The man killed in the shooting is being hailed as a hero who possibly saved dozens of lives. Ellen Booknia reports.
As the gunman opened fire inside Geneva Presbyterian Church in Southern California, 52-year-old Dr. John Cheng tackled him, allowing other parishioners to subdue him and tie him up with electrical cords. Cheng was shot and killed during the attack.
Dr. Cheng, understanding that there was elderly everywhere and they couldn't get out of the premises because the doors had been chained. After others had been shot, he took it upon himself to charge across the room and to do everything he could to disable the assailant. He was shot.
Dr. Cheng is a hero in this incident. Based on statements from the witnesses and corroborated by other means,
the suspect has been identified as 68-year-old David Cho of Las Vegas, a U.S. citizen who authorities say grew up in Taiwan. He's said to have chained the doors in the church and placed glue in the locks before opening fire inside. He had 2 9mm handguns that were legally bought in Las Vegas and 3 handbags containing extra ammunition and Molotov cocktail-type devices. About 40 people from a Taiwanese Presbyterian congregation were attending a luncheon in the church. Authorities say Cho methodically planned the attack because he was upset over China-Taiwan tensions. Investigators say Cho's hatred for Taiwan was documented on handwritten notes that were found.
Was a politically motivated hate incident, agreements that this individual had between himself and the Taiwanese community at large.
We opened a federal hate crimes investigation today to determine further what type of federal charges can be brought.
Cho's family was apparently among many forcibly removed from the mainland to Taiwan sometime after 1948. He's being held on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
Sri Lanka's new prime minister is proposing privatizing the country's loss-making airline as part of reforms aimed at solving the country's worst economic crisis in decades. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa last Thursday to quell the island's political and economic unrest. He says he plans to propose a special relief budget. Meanwhile, protests continue as anti-government demonstrators gathered outside a police station demanding action against pro-government supporters who attacked protesters on May 9th. They're also demanding the resignation of President Rajapaksa, who they blame for the economic crisis. The city's first subsidized housing to be built by a private developer, New World Development, is expected to offer 300 units by 2027.
Lawmakers say this format will not only save time, but can also get away with procedures such as land resumption.
New World Built for Good, the developer's social enterprise unit, earlier submitted a proposal to the Town Planning Board to build a subsidized housing block on a 30,000 square foot site on Lam He Road in Yuen Long. Rezoning work is expected to take up to 9 months, and if construction can begin next year as scheduled, the project will be completed in 2027 at the earliest. A lawmaker applauded the move, saying land resumption efforts are not required as a private developer has provided the land for the project. Lau Kwok Fan said if the government speeds up vetting procedures, such as approving architectural drawings, the project's completion date can even be shortened by a year. The developer aims to sell the housing units at half the market price. It hopes this will act as an incentive for other private developers to participate in the construction of subsidized housing. A member of the consultation board of the New World Built for Good, Anthony Chu, said the project also includes facilities such as clubhouses for families and young people to enjoy. Buyers will only be required to pay a down payment as low as 5% of the unit's price. The developer stressed it hopes to provide truly affordable homes to those in need.
A study shows that 40% of the surveyed students have faced harassment online. The organizer of the study has urged the government to pay attention to children's internet safety. Save the Children Hong Kong has asked the University of Hong Kong to survey around 1,300 primary and secondary students. Some 40% of them said they have unwillingly received explicit contents online, mostly in the form of advertisements, at least once in the past year. The survey also suggests that 1 in 5 of the students surveyed have faced online bullying. Experts say teenagers who are neglected or have been abused in reality will likely face more threats on the internet. They've also urged the government to authorize institutions to offer assistance and complaint channels to those in need. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.